Welcome to the Gifted Neurodivergent Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the exploration and cultivation of the outside genius found in neurodivergence.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Gifted Neurodivergent Podcast. My name is Lillian Skinner. It is the end of the year, so we are going to talk about how our gifted neurodivergence, we should just call it giftedness and high sensing, is creative intelligence, and we need to learn to stop beating ourselves up over the fact that we're different and then start embracing it. A good friend of mine and I this year are embarking on, for our New Year's resolution, noticing patterns in the stock market. She and I work together at Bank of America, and she is now, I guess she's sort of semi-retired, and she's a day trader. And she's also brilliant. She's very highly emotional, she's very highly intelligent, she's very highly intuitive. And she and I are going to swap services where she shows me how to do the stock market and I show her how to use her intuition to trade. And we're going to build a program out of this, and it's going to be pretty freaking cool. And this has been not my New Year's resolution, because I don't believe in New Year's resolutions, because those are things that you do to make yourself fixed, or to make yourself fit in, or to actually placate others, or do what's best for others. This year I want to encourage you to do what's best for you. And the first thing that's best for you is that you accept that you are exactly the way you're supposed to be. If you listened to my podcast last week with Dr. Silverman, I was very clear in her podcast and her notes that she said, I need to go into myself, that she was saying that to all of us, that we are on a mission, that our way of being in the world is to follow our intuition to our success, to our full potential, to our way of being. You have to trust yourself. You have a purpose in this world, and it will pan out. And I grew up in poverty. I didn't believe that. I grew up being told that there's something wrong with me. I grew up every day of my life being told I was going to amount to nothing, and that I had very little value, and that I was a drag on the world. And that was not cool. I didn't appreciate that one bit. And what I realize now is that they were giving me what they felt, and they were projecting it on me because they saw in me things that they didn't like about themselves. The irony is that I like myself. I think that I have a lot of value. I think that I'm a very kind and generous person, and I think that people have used me in the past for that, and that is not going to happen again. I think that people who want to show up and try to do that are fools, because I am walking around with some amazing insight that everybody and their brother could use for our future. And some of that amazing insight is around the use of AI and how it is going to separate us from the rest. We are going to get our natural places back in the world if we do this right, if we band together, if we teach each other, if we stop caring about competition and start caring about collaboration. Because I can do a lot on my own, but I don't really want to. It's lonely. And I also think I can do way more if I have people who are around me that compensate for what I'm weak, and I can compensate for what they're weak, but also validate and strengthen me. And that is the biggest part, right? We are walking around with incredible strengths. We also have incredible weaknesses. But in those weaknesses, we need other people. It creates a natural community. And when we have these incredible strengths, we will need to go into them, so that means we'll need other people to help us with the parts that cost us more to do. Because I love working in my strengths. It's easy. It's an instant payoff, like for dopamine. It's an instant payoff for oxytocin. It's an instant payoff. It's all wonderful and joyful. But it's not, it means that there's other things that I'm not paying attention to, and those things I'll need help with. I want to build a community of people like me so that we can help each other, that we are no longer being seen as less than because we aren't everything. And with AI, all of our idiosyncrasies, all the things that make us us, are going to suddenly be incredibly valuable, because we're going to be able to see perspectives just other people cannot see. We're going to be able to enhance perspectives other people cannot see or enhance. And we're going to be able to do that for each other. So what I would like to talk about today is Robert Sapolsky's book, Behave, and free will and New Year's resolutions. Because I don't think we should make New Year's resolutions unless the resolution is, this year, you're not going to worry about what everyone else thinks. You're going to worry about who you are and what you're walking around with. Because you are walking around with something amazing, and we need to cultivate that. We need to understand it, and we need to get you moving into a space where you are actually fully aware of the potential you have. Now, Robert Sapolsky's book was really long and really great. I don't agree with everything he thinks in there, but there were some really beautiful pieces and parts in there that I just wanted to highlight because I think it's the time of the cat. I think we should call this the era of the cat. We have had the era of the dog, where those people who are the most dog-like, who are the most obedient, who are the most willing to die for their owners, that has been rewarded. And it's not even loyalty, it's the giving up of yourself completely to the other person to be molded. The problem is that we live in an era of psychopathy, and psychopaths don't have emotions. And I know this because I have the ability to feel other people, and I have been around plenty of psychopaths, and they have no emotions. They're just kind of flat. They can feel yours, but they themselves don't actually have emotions. And what that means is they're cut off from their long term. They're cut off from their subconscious. They're cut off from their really the most important part of their intelligence. And we go through a school system, we go through an entire social system that actually tells us that our emotions can't be trusted. Our emotions don't have value. Our emotions are actually a bad thing. This is a lie. Our emotions are a great thing. Our emotions are so powerful because they are giving us sensory data that our brain either is so big our brain can't process it at that point, or is incomplete but big enough to know the gist. So because we can tell by our emotions that certain things are kosher or not, or certain things are appropriate or not, or certain things are missing or not, when we have our intuition, we know which direction to go in. And this is what Dr. Silverman was talking about, and this is what I'm talking about as far as when we go into our intuition, what is delivered to us is the direction that the answer is in. And so then we go in that direction, and the answer unfolds on our path. I believe that each and every one of you who's listening to this and in feeling that this is speaking to you, you are gifted. You are gifted in ways that you have not been told. And AI is actually going to be the first time in your life that you are going to be able to see that giftedness. Because what AI is doing is giving you all the data that our society has expected you to know that you didn't, because they actually restricted that data. So you couldn't have access to knowing, so that the only way you could do it is if your parents were wealthy. And I find it fascinating because I'll go around certain groups, certain philosophy groups, certain psychology groups, certain educated groups, and they'll talk in all these terms, and I'll have to ask them what they mean by those terms because, I'm not a specialist in their area. But I'm asking them because I can see wide and big and I want to know. And they kind of treat me disdainfully like, oh, you're so childlike, or you don't know what you're talking about. And then when they explain it, I'm like, oh, I have insight on that. You want to hear it? And then I give it. And then they get scared. They get scared because I just usurped them and I don't even have a degree in that area. And that's what you are walking around with. We see patterns in nature. So even though I don't know all the vocabulary in the world, I don't know all the vocabulary that's used out there to describe it, I still understand the concepts. I understand theories. I make them. That's what big picture savants do. That's what big picture neurodivergents do. And we have been denied our big picture because that's the only way to have our society run as it was this for those of us with big picture abilities to have to be subverted so that the psychopaths essentially could run it and take over. We've all been siloed, we've all been put into corners, and the people that were useful, if you were neurodivergent in a particular way, then you were very useful. But even still, you were back officed and treated like crap, and they made it seem like there were a million of you when there was only one or two of you. So now we have people who are the most successful people being really the ADHD and the autistics. But both cases, I find that we are subverted. We're massively subverted. And I just don't know why we're giving our talents to people who are just going to stick us in a back office or subvert us. They're not giving us a space to be successful. They're actually actively working against it by constantly holding us to a standard of normal when we're not normal, and we all know that. And I don't know why normal is so valued when it's going to go away. I am not great in the system. I worked in it and I did fine and I worked my butt off, but I damn near killed myself. And the payoff was to get cheated over and over again. And I'm not doing that anymore. I refuse to work for people who are going to cheat me. And I have worked up my intuition to the degree that I can feel if someone is that way. And I can tell when someone's a psychopath because of my intuition that they don't have emotions. And emotions mean you can't see the future and you don't remember the past, because that's what emotions bring up. They cover all the patterns that covered the past and they tell you what will happen in the future. And you are now going to be needing those because there's not going to be any authority on anything because we have gotten rid of all the big pictures in the system. We've gotten rid of all the neurodivergents that are healthy, and everybody in the system left is either a pawn of a psychopath or a psychopath themselves, and they aren't going to be able to see what you're describing because they're too brainwashed, they're too entrenched, they're too obedient, they're too following the master. And you haven't been able to do that, and you don't know why, and you're beating yourself up that you can't be a good little soldier or a good little puppy dog or whatever. But let's look at it this way. You're a cat. You're independent. You know how to stalk. You know how to hunt. You know how to take care of yourself. You drop you anywhere in the world and you will survive. You'll figure it out. And what I want to do is make a colony of cats, of healthy cats, of cats who are collaborative, who will come together, but also, know they need their space and deliver for each other, and then go back to their respective spaces so they can recharge. That is the ideal situation for me. If it sounds like the ideal situation for you, then maybe you're going to join my collaborative community, however that works. But first it's going to have to start online, and then it's going to have to move from there. So I have a few people that are working with me on it, and we're just building it, and we figure we have 5 years before this is going to have to really super come to fruition. So I understand if you don't have the space right now, figure you have 5 years before I'm saying we have to buy land, we have to settle it up. But that also gives you a chance to have space in your life to build towards that, to figure out what you are, to engage with people who are like you, and start on your path in the world. All I know is this is what I am doing, and this is where I am going, and this is the thing that's very, very clear to me. The other thing that's very, very clear to me is that you have so much potential, and right now you're probably dying. You're probably scared, and the short term seems very, very nervous. When I was younger, I had to train myself how to live in the long term, how to focus on the long term and not get bogged down by the short term, because my emotions are so high and my sensitivity is so high that when things are bad in the short term, they are overwhelming. They are horribly strong and horribly painful and horribly overwhelming. And because I spent a good 20 years of my life, maybe I should say 22, learning to live for the future, I am now fantastic at it. And I don't want to say that my trauma was good for me, but I will say it was valuable. Because no trauma is good, but it is valuable if you can heal from it. And healing, I believe healing requires the big picture. If you understand what everything was and why it happened and how it comes together, then you can use what you went through to benefit you. You can use it to avoid it in the future, and you can use it to benefit you, pay, grow, whatever. Everything you went through has a purpose. There's a reason, and you learned something really, really important in it. And I want you to start focusing on what you learned and not what's wrong with you. Now that said, I had a coach who kept telling me that when we were pre-babies, we would choose our parents. When we were conceived or whatever, we were supposed to choose our parents. I don't believe that. I don't want to get ridiculous about I wanted to go through what I went through because then it would lead to this today. I don't believe that. My brain is pretty solid. I can remember back to being a baby. If I could really remember back to being in utero, sure as heck not have chosen my parents over again. I would have chosen a different path because the path I had was really hard. And I'm not stupid. I don't want to make the same mistake twice. I didn't get to choose my parents. I made the best out of the situation. I lucked out because there was some decent genes there and that I was able to use those genes. And then I also happened to be born into this place where I was able to get the information to heal and see the big picture. But the data is not all out there. Part of it is me being able to pull it together. I do realize that the reason that other people didn't heal is because they were either from a different era, they don't have this data, or they didn't take the path I did. But I do not believe for 1 second I chose my parents and I chose to go on this journey. I believe that this is biological. I believe in Robert Sapolsky's sort of perspective where we are all made and we're a part of an organism, and if we're going to be really true about it, we should use scientific terms and understand that this is a part of the biology. The spiritual world makes me crazy because they give us spaces and things sometimes that make it seem like we'd want to go through this. There's no way in heck I would want to go through what I went through. What I would like to do, though, is realize that we are all in cycles and they're all different types, and the biology of the world is fairly indifferent to us, and we get to take all that information and use it to our best ability. And that's what I'm really trying to offer people is, look, I have figured this out, and I'm trying to share it so that you can share it, so that you can make your path better. Because if you make your path better, you make my path better, you make my children's path better, you make everyone like you's path better. And that causes the ripple effect. I am giving you my ripple effect and asking you to further it, make it bigger, include in my ripples your ripples, so that we can really change the world. So if you're going to make a New Year's resolution, I want you to think about the fact that our society sets it up so that very few of us have free will. And if you want to accept that you don't have much free will, it is actually a valuable thing because it allows you to realize that if you never had free will, all the choices, all the things they're trying to tell you, they're sort of a lie. They're a lie because you need free will in order to be able to do them. And if the society's set up where it's just set up so that some people succeed and other people don't, then you have to accept that your free will is to go in the area, the degree, or place where it wasn't set up for you to find your free will, because you are not supposed to be valued in society. You're not supposed to be used in society other than as a pawn for other people. And you're meant for greater things. You're meant to be independent. You're meant to live and figure it out and take care of yourself and get the lay of the land. And cats do not build giant hierarchies. They're sort of individual people who live together and they regard each other. Cats tend to be, they like their owners or they like their people that they live with because those people allow them to be them. When I was growing up, we had a cat, and it wasn't really anybody's pet. It was kind of mean, actually. It was always attacking us. But she also was kind of sick, and I don't think my mom ever really took her to the doctor enough. We were all afraid of her. We thought she was going to attack us half the time. But when it suited her, she'd come around and get affection from us, and we were like, oh, yay, she wants affection. And then when it didn't suit her, which was most of the time, she'd attack you if you tried to give her affection. So you learn to actually be on her terms. And this is a funny thing, because I think that's actually how we're supposed to be. We are supposed to train the world to be on our terms. We can say, we have a lot to offer, but we also have high sensitivity. And if you want to value me, and you want to be a part of my circle, then you're going to let me have my space because I'm too sensitive to not have it. But at the same time, I will do you a favor. If I were a cat, I would just, keep your house mouse free, or I would give you some sort of value for it. But I'm not going to be a loyal dog who's constantly in your face bugging you. I'm going to go away. And you won't be making a servant out of me because I'm not a servant. I'll never be a servant. I will be a peer. I will be a value to you, but I will not be at your beck and call. I think that's a perfectly healthy way to live. I think you should embrace that way of living. I think you should just consider yourself the oddball who doesn't. Now, in Robert Sapolsky's book, he talks a little bit about how humans domesticated dogs, and he says that dogs are basically infantilized. And I got to tell you, I realized that our society is infantilized. And the reason that I'm such a weirdo is that I was never infantilized. I got two youngest parents, and they were heavily infantilized, and they wanted me to take care of them. And they constantly were letting me know how I didn't do a good enough job. And they both grew up with older sisters who were sort of put in positions where they were taking care of the younger ones, especially for my father. And so my parents thought nothing of having me be the main parent to the entire family. And they let me know every day that I was selfish and that I wasn't doing a good enough job when that wasn't my job. But I took it very seriously, and I did make it my job. And I really tried to be the best sibling parent I could be. I wasn't perfect. I made a lot of mistakes, but I also learned fantastic amount of information. I learned how to be a good parent. I learned how to raise children who were different, and I learned that our society wasn't ever going to help me, wasn't ever going to serve me, and I needed to figure out something else. Now, I killed myself plenty hard trying to build a comfortable space in this world, and it really almost killed me, but it taught me that this comfortable space I'm going to build is not going to serve anyone more than it will serve me. I have to do it a different way. I have to make it so that it serves me as much as it serves everyone else, which I think is a fair deal. But right now we have it set up in our society, so in order for you to even get a piece of your pie, to get a chance at it, you have to serve other people and prove you're worthy, like you're asking for the freedom from slavery. That's a bad deal, because you know what? You're walking around with so much more than everybody else has. You're walking around with so much more, and you're being left uncultivated so that they can basically cheat you out of it. And I'm tired of that, and I don't want you to have to go through that like I did. I don't want you to go through it like my husband did. I want you to go through it like everybody in my generation did. There's going to be a lot of this. I think we're moving into fascism. I actually got banned from Substack because because I was not, I wrote something about, if we shouldn't ban Nazis, because if you're going to ban people, you're going to ban me because I'm saying stuff that's like out there. And I said, we've been in fascism for 100 years. And the thing that we really ought to be thinking about is not like how we have all embraced fascism. Like we instituted fascism in our school system 100 years ago, and we've been manifesting it now ever since. And it's fascinating when you think about it. Like, we have a school system that doesn't even let you pee when you have to pee. I mean, if that's not controlling, I don't know what is. And fascism is all about might is right, power is not to be questioned, and you do what you're told. It turns everybody in the society into a dog. So you don't have natural leaders, you don't have natural experts, you are constantly waiting on the society to deliver those. Well, the society's not done a very good job, because the people who have been the experts have only known average, and I have been unserved, and you have been unserved. But now they're starting to get around to our stuff, but they're really keeping such a myopic view on it. They don't have a big picture view. So I'm looking online all the time to try to understand, how does my brain work? How is it different? How is it better? How is it worse? What do I need to know about it? And I don't find anything out there that seems to really reflect me. I did find something in Robert's book, Behave, about the anterior cingulate cortex. And the anterior cingulate cortex is actually what helps us recognize our patterns. It's the part that notices when things are different. And mine works fantastically. And I was looking up to see about how it was related to autism. And of course, it's only dysfunctional. They don't actually have higher functioning in there. But my ACC works overtime. My ACC is kicking butt and taking names. And it tells me what the heck's going on with life. When anything changes, it notices patterns. It notices the second a pattern's off. And it's probably the reason why I'm sitting here doing this podcast right now and able to tell you all these little tiny things I found. But one of the interesting things about it was that if you look it up, they keep talking about our social deficit disorder. When we don't have a social deficit disorder, actually we're just not programmed. And this is the dog versus cat thing again. If you're a cat, you're not going to get socially programmed. It's hard to train a cat. And the reason that it's not so hard to train a dog is a dog's intelligence is different. A cat's intelligence is funny. They don't really say too much about it. They always talk about dogs being smart, but dogs are good at being trained. Cats, you cannot train because cats own you. You are basically your cat's mom or cat's slave, right? And that is a big deal. That is intelligence. So you, as a cat, have a high functioning ACC, and this idea that autism is a disorder is a total lie, because if it isn't a disorder, it is just high sensing. It is moving through the world as animal moves through the world, and knowing your sensing data. That's what it is. So all the sensing data people, I've got another feather in my cap on how this is utter bull crap and how that they've oppressed us, because the ACC is totally defined as dysfunction and the reason behind our behavioral social differences. But in reality, we're not going by the rules that our society puts forth. We can't. Our complexity, our patterns understanding makes us give our own rules. And this is why I was constantly under question and under confusion, because I was confused because the things they were saying didn't reflect the things I knew already, even as a little tiny kid. And this is why Linda said I never integrated. It is our ACC. It is a powerful thing, and it is being defined as dysfunctional when ours is high functioning. There's just nothing on us that's about what we have to offer. And I am trying to change that. I'm trying to show you all the benefits of being you, because there's no reason nature would make us so high functioning, so amazing, and then put us in average. We're not average. We're never meant to be average. We are the people who prepare for what's coming. We are the ones who are going to naturally know. And that involves us getting in touch with the natural way we are. It involves us getting in touch with our high sensing and understanding it and using it. It involves us getting in touch with our intuition. It involves us getting in touch with ourself. So I want to encourage you for your New Year's resolution to no longer be a dog, but rather be yourself. Be a cat, be whatever animal you actually want to be. You should be whatever you want to be. Figure out what kind of animal you're going to be, and then be it. Because animals are a lot smarter than us. We think that animals are dumber, but in Robert Sapolsky's book, there was another example of how animals are smarter. And it was this woman, she was opening a box, but she was doing it with a lot of extra steps. And when they gave it to a group of monkeys and they gave it to a group of children, the monkeys skipped all the extra steps and went straight through and did it. And the children did every freaking extra step she did. and then they opened it. And I realized that those children had been programmed out of their intelligence. They had been programmed out of seeing what the purpose was, and they had been programmed to regurgitate. And the monkeys hadn't. And this is why we are not exceptional. Animals managed to figure out how to live without any formal training. They managed to figure out how to move through the world and survive. And they actually have better lives. I wrote a post, and I think I might have said it, that we only work 2.5 hours as hunter-gatherers. And Robert Sapolsky talked about this too. He talked about how as hunter-gatherers, we're the original luxury class, or the original people of luxury, because they only work 2.5 hours a day as hunter-gatherers to sustain themselves. 2.5 hours a day. I could easily work 2.5 hours a day. That would be fun. But in the other 2.5 hours, they learned, they socialized, they made things, that they worked at their crafts. It was all a part of learning, growing, and Margaret Mead, all those guys. All the people that went and hung out with indigenous cultures are like, these people are brilliant. The children are brilliant. And the reason they're brilliant is they're in touch with their whole intelligence. Our society shuts us off from our whole intelligence. We are shut off from our sensing intelligence. And our sensing intelligence is the big part of our intelligence. Our sensing intelligence is something that takes a long time to cultivate, mostly because we go through a school system that uncultivates it. And then we have to cultivate it when we get back in. But children who are in indigenous cultures, and there aren't many that are natural anymore, and he talks about Pinkler's book and how they were warring and they were this or that, but he's saying that they weren't really truly in a state of hunter-gatherer where there was abundance and all of that. We're going to have to create that, which is something I'm very aware of, because we don't have it for ourselves naturally. We're going to have to create it. We're going to have to figure out a way to make it so that we can be basically hunters and gatherers in a community style. And I really still think that if we could build like a SAG sort of system where we're all, and this is what I'm working on with Umbrella, where we're all kind of putting in what our value is to the new world with our perspectives in AI, we all can build a community for each other that we put in for collective parts that are value to each other, like we become a family essentially, and we have collective work towards each other, kind of like the Amish do. Agriculture is actually the worst thing in the world that happened to most of us. Agriculture actually took our quality of life and drove it really far down. It introduced us to disease. It introduced us to all of these things that having livestock and animals and land right around us, it actually made us so that we were not healthy anymore. And his point on that was that we were living with our feces. We were living with the animal's feces. Like the whole idea of the forest is that it takes the feces as manure, but then it's like spread over miles and miles and miles. And we got to learn to get rid of that if we're going to be healthy, because living with our waste is the biggest problem. Capitalism then magnifies that, because capitalism takes our feces and makes it into industrial waste and all of these other things. And I talked about how corporations are considered humans in America, the United States, except for they're not required to clean up after themselves. So they're constantly polluting it. So we have basically super gross human corporations that are polluting and leaving it there for the rest of us all to get sick in. And we have to start seeing capitalism as part of the agricultural waste, as part of the thing that made us unhealthy from what our original state was. I also think that we should see capitalism for what it really is. It is a dirty, gross, self-centered human. It's not actually serving the group as a whole. It doesn't contribute to the community. I mean, we're to the point now where you go to Walmart and they want you to donate money, and then they donate that money under their name when it wasn't their money they gave away, it was other people's money. It's such utter bullcrap. They should be donating their money to bring their name up, not my money. That's incredible. So not only do they pollute, they contribute to the environment's degradation in like epic levels. If you were to just compare it to them, they leave all of their waste and their low pay and all of these things, so none of us can actually go after them to clean it up. And they benefit a small few at the expense of the vast majority. And they're psychopaths. I mean, literally, they're the psychopaths of the community, only they're incredibly powerful kings. In the book Behave by Robert Sapolsky, he also goes into how pastoral cultures have really been the ones that caused the most damage. There's this whole thing about honor. The women are subjugated. They don't have as much equal. It's all about land and protecting your flocks, and there's a lot of violence in the pastoral communities. And so it was interesting because he does cover how almost our rules today, and he doesn't say this overtly, but he this is what I took it as. He says our rules today are basically, we got the worst of the agriculture with living in our poo and all that disease, which we're actually now going back towards because of capitalism. And he doesn't exactly say that either, but that's what I'm taking from it. And then he was talking about the pastoral communities, how they were violent, they had higher deaths, that they subjugated women, that everybody was treated as property, and men were constantly worried about their honor, and there's all this honor stuff. And he was saying that was the most violent communities, and that today we almost have both of those in capitalism. That's what the world we're walking around with. It is a really bad deal. He did talk a lot about Iceland and how Iceland has the most equality and how the Nordic countries have a lot of equality and how some countries have gotten there to a better place. But he lives in the USA. He is a professor at Stanford. It's not like he's not wholly aware of the fact that the US is going to a really bad place. And this is his way of dealing with it. And I know he's actually already working on another book because I asked him if he wanted to come on my podcast and I was instantly turned down. But this is a tiny podcast, so I don't really blame him at all. We have 8 billion people in this world, and that is alarming and unsustainable and destructive. And I don't know exactly what to do about that. But I do know that I have to figure out how I'm going to move through the world and what I can do for me and how to help as many people as I can grow to be the best people they can be so that they can figure out how to navigate it too. Because I'm not going to be here forever and I can only offer this. I can't offer too much. I don't have enough resources to fix things. I just have the resource of my intelligence, of my understanding, and I'm trying to share that so that other people can have it and they can make the world a better place too. So that is my purpose for this podcast. Another interesting thing about Robert Sapolsky's Behave book was he goes on, and at the end he asks everyone to reconsider for the justice system how we use our intelligence and how we use the fact that in our society we're holding people responsible for having free will without understanding how little free will they have and using that as part of the system. And he says we should just redo the whole thing. And I'm even worse than him because I think we should redo the whole darn thing. There's a little bit of egotism in his book in the sense that he grew up obviously in probably middle class or upper middle class, and he was loved and well taken care of, and so his intelligence reflects that. His intelligence doesn't know what it's like to not have. His intelligence doesn't know what it's like to be beaten down. He's probably always been told he's smart. He's probably always been told that he's valuable. And he is still open-minded enough that he can write these books, but there's parts of him that I find to be a little bit clueless on what it's like to grow up without the poverty. But he does mention how those of us who grow up in environments that are traumatizing, how it changes our brains and how it affects us. And I think our society really damages us further if we're traumatized. It throws us out if we're traumatized. It blames us instead of trying to help us, because the truth is our society is a psychopathic society. So if you've had run-ins with sociopaths or psychopaths, you have trauma around that, and you have a lot of PTSD, pain, fear, etc. that's coming up to try to protect you and say, hey, you've been through this before, let's not do that again. And yet our system doesn't really allow us to break away. So we're all imprisoned in the sense that we're having to navigate psychopaths and sociopaths again, despite the fact that we know that it's not good for us. And that's what a lot of our reactions are too. It's like, I'm trapped with a psychopath. I'm trapped with the lion or the tiger, and I can't get free. And that's really horrible. And I hate that, and I want to stop that, and I want us to be free, because we have to be free in order to use our creative intelligence. We have to be free in order to be our full potential. We have to be free, and we also have to be in a family that gives a crap. And a lot of us don't have that. A lot of us, our own parents have been turned against us because of our neurodivergence, because the system has said, there's something wrong with your child. And I'm going to do a podcast with my son, who does Gaming with Aid, and if you've ever looked at my website, and he's going to talk about what it's like to be a boy with ADHD and how you are successful. And we're going to talk about how the system, it really tried to get between us, and how my emotions came up and would get really mad at those people, and then I'd feel like, oh, I shouldn't be mad at them, I need to get on my son. But eventually I realized this is a big fat scam. They're literally trying to get between my child and I, because they are trying to break him like they broke me, so that he is a good little worker. And if you remember that Linda said in my podcast, I said she told me I never fully integrated, and I said, well, I did integrate my family, and I had to positively disintegrate from them and let them go. But I realized that positive disintegration thing, it means that you come to the realization. And I really think most of us have always been aware. I don't think we come to the realization. We actually just come to the opportunity to escape. The whole world is set up for people who are middle class and up, and that is going away. We don't have middle class and up anymore. That's such a tiny amount of people, and oftentimes I find them to be very sure that they're right when they're not, and they're not aware of how the vast majority of the people move the world. They don't know what it's like to be starving. They don't know what it's like to need. They don't know what it's like to repeatedly not get your needs met, and the cumulative costs of that. For me, I can tell you that my not getting my needs met as a child repeatedly has caused me chronic pain and has caused me a lot of issues that I really don't want for anyone else. And I'm trying to help them realize that they can break free, because if you do not break free, if you just keep going as usual, business as usual, they're going to get worse. That cost will be so much greater in the future, because we may not have our medical systems like we do now. I have lived with an herbalist person, and I can tell you there's some value in it, but it's not that great of a value, and it's not the same as if you had been taken care of the whole time and you maintained your health and you were exercising. It's a much different way to maintain that sort of herbal approaches than to do what we have done. Now, I am somebody who shouldn't even probably be walking. I spiral fractured my ankle so bad one year that I really didn't think I was walking, and I got a really great surgeon who put it back together. And the amazing thing is that I can walk and I can run and I can exercise like I used to. I do worry about losing that level of care and those extra things. But on the flip side, I have so many other things going on because of the system that it's like I don't know that it's supposed to be that way. The reason I got that spiral fracture was a seizure, and I might not have had those in real life because I was allowed to sleep enough, because I wasn't constantly on the schedule of things that I couldn't maintain because I'm too sensitive for that schedule. So it's a catch-22. It's like, in one way, I might never have fractured my ankle, and in another way, I might have still done it, and then I wouldn't have had that surgeon. So I would like to ideally not throw everything out. There's certain value that our system has that I'd like to keep, but its medical system's already one of the first things to fall. The school system's another thing that's falling. The political system's also falling. It's all just going to topple. Those are already falling, so the rest of it's going to fall down too. We have infrastructure in the next 10 years that's going to just start collapsing. There's no money to fix it. They're talking about 25% of all the bridges are going to go in the next 10 years if we don't have these things fixed. And that means we're not going to be able to get across certain things or to certain places. And that may be good or bad. I'm not really sure. But we're going to have to learn to live in a new way. And it's going to have to transition repeatedly over and over again, because we aren't going to be able to live like hunter-gatherers, and we're not going to be able to learn like farmers if we poison the crap out of everything. We're going to have to figure out our own way. So we can probably figure out a way with hydroponics. We can probably figure out a way with brilliant people. I know my husband and I have already come up with some amazing ways to get food for our family. We've come up with ways to protect our family. It's not that hard to do. I have plenty of ideas and ability to make it. It's just that I don't know that I have the time. So it's a matter of building a collective, and we will take care of each other, and we will make sure that everybody's good. But for your New Year's resolution, if you're making one, I want you to make sure that you start off with the realization that you are fully whole, that you are everything you ever needed to be, that you are everything you'll ever need to be, and that you are lovable and wonderful and amazing, and that all you need is to be mirrored by someone who's like you, and you will manifest it. You can't manifest what you don't know is there. You can't manifest what you have when you've been told it's not possible and there's no path there. But it is possible if you find people who can validate you. It took me a long time to find people who could validate me. For most of my life, I've been told that I don't exist, that what I say I am is not real, and that I am a narcissist, or I am crazy, or I'm insane, or I am schizophrenic. There's this constant fear that who I was inherently horrible and bad. And they were wrong. I'm inherently good. I'm inherently a hard worker. I'm inherently kind and generous. I'm inherently a giving person to the degree that others feel that they should take advantage of me because I'm stupid. I'm not stupid. I'm not stupid even slightly. And they are the fools if they think that they're going to get something out of taking advantage of me, because they don't know long term. I'm here for the long term, and if they get something out of me in the short term, the cost is the long term, because I don't give a whole lot in the short term. I am a long term payoff. The information I will give you will not hit the first moment you hear it. It's so dimensional that it's going to hit on different times your whole life long. I have friends and clients and people that I've made really close relationships with who call me back years later and like, you know what, you freaking were right on so many levels. It's still hitting me today. And I feel that way about Dr. Silverman. Some of the things she says to me, I'm like, I don't really get. And then a year later, I'm like, okay, there it was. I got it now. And that's what it's like to be around multidimensional people, multidimensional thinkers. When you're around multidimensional thinkers, they give you insights and you're like, I don't get this. Like, or, okay, thanks. That doesn't mean a lot to me. That's a piece in a pattern somewhere in your brain. And then one day that pattern gets completed and it realizes and you're like, oh my God, they were right. They were totally right. Now I see it. And you feel stupid. But it's because we take in so many dimensions that when we're talking to somebody, it's almost like your conversation is kind of all over the place and they're like, I can't follow you. But really what it is that you're slotting all these things and it's bringing up new stuff and you're trying to figure out, and it feels not congruent to other people. And it doesn't even necessarily feel congruent to me at times, but in the end, that question I asked that didn't make any sense at the time pays off later and it makes complete and utter sense. So I want you to accept who you are. I want you to stop trying to fix yourself. I want you to stop looking inside to figure out what's wrong with you. I want you to just assume everything is right with you. And I know what assume means, don't you have to tell me. But this case, there's no you and me, it's just you. So you can get away with it. Because that's what assuming's for. It's for your own self. If you add another person and you assume what they're going to do, that's where it makes the butt out of you. But if it's for you, it doesn't. If you assume the best about yourself, then you have a lot more space to go out into the world and err. I do not have perfectionism. I do not have perfectionism. I am not afraid to screw up. Everybody else is afraid for me to screw up. I don't know why. They're constantly getting mad at me for not being perfect and like putting things out with spelling errors, but I really truly believe it doesn't make any difference. I cannot see my spelling errors and my grammar errors when I first publish something, and I'll publish it anyways because this makes me go back and reread it and make it better. So I publish it and then I come back later and I update it and I make it better, and then I come back again, and I'll sometimes come back 4 times for something before I'm like, okay, it's done, I don't have to keep doing it. But I keep doing it because my brain processes on so many levels that I need to redo that, I need to update it, I need to put it out there. And it will change in its understanding for people, but it will fundamentally be the same, but it will get either more detailed or clarity. And that's really valuable. We should all recognize the fact that the more intelligent you are, the more your brain is going to process and put things out on stages and steps. And our school system says you only get one draft and then you get to put it out and it's supposed to be perfect. Well, that's if you're a simple thinker. That is not the case if you are a brilliant thinker. So let's stop looking at perfectionism as a problem or like, oh, I'm a perfectionist. I mean, remember that's the favorite thing they say, like, oh, what's your problem? Oh, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. Yeah, I totally said that in interviews too. Never meant it, but I always said it because I'm really not a perfectionist. But I realized why I'm not a perfectionist. My perspective taking is so big that I know that there's a bazillion perspectives and I don't know which one you want exactly, because I know if you're a multidimensional thinker yourself, I have to figure out which one you want because you're not just simple. If you're simple, it's easy. Then I know which one you want. If you're simple, I'm like talking to a small child, but a really simple small child, because I don't know that my children were ever really that simple. And even when you're little kids, they know that kids think in multidimensional ways because they use objects to explain things. They know that there needs context. If you just tell a child, do this or get in trouble, the child will do it, but they don't learn. It actually makes the child dumber. I had totally had parents who did not let me ask any questions. I would get smacked if I asked why, which a couple times it came out of my mouth and I got cuffed. But we were not allowed to ask any questions, what, where, when, why, nothing like that. We just had to be good little people who got into the seat and did their seatbelt and never asked a question, just went and did whatever you were told. I mean, I was constantly felt like I was a prisoner and I was being shackled and taken to the next place because there was never any knowledge of what was going to happen next. And I was supposed to be giddy and happy on cue, and I was supposed to be the good little child who validated everyone. I didn't ever get validation, but I was supposed to give it. And I did. I really did try to give it. But I do have autism, and in groups, I am pretty shut down. And one-on-one, I am my full capacity. I'm telling a friend today that highly sensitive people operate like with echolocation because we're kind of blasting our emotions out to a certain degree, trying to wait for to come back to us to see where their emotions are at so we can understand them. And so we're constantly doing this sort of echolocalia thing that you see with people who are neurodivergent, because it is a sensing thing. Like, our whole body's involved in understanding the other person. And they have that all written off as improper. But that only is true if you are a dog, if you are following your master. If you're a cat, it is perfectly appropriate. It's perfectly appropriate that you're stalking through the woods, trying to figure out whatever is. That's appropriate. That is completely appropriate for us. And we have pathologized all of that because we're smarter. Not dumber, smarter. We are more aware, and that awareness makes us harder control. So they have pathologized us, they've made us feel less than, because it is convenient, works for them, they get our genius, and then they throw us out, and nobody questions it. Nobody questions, because we're disabled, we're wrong. You're not disabled, and you're not wrong. You're freaking awesome, you're amazing. And this year, I want you to really set on a path that understands your full capacity, your full amazingness, and this should be your life path. This is just the first year you're going to do it. You're no longer going to see yourself having problems. You're going to figure out what's good about you. And if it's wrong and like you can't do it, who cares? There's 8 billion other people in the world that possibly can do it. So you're so solid. You've never had more chances in your life to be a specialist in your thing. And as you get older, you will actually build onto that. I want you to do everything you ever wanted. I want you to have free reign to just embrace yourself as who you are and cultivate everything that you're supposed to be. But I want you to go into all of your hobbies that you wanted to learn. Do not beat yourself up about it. Go and do what you have to do, but quit on the rest of the world of serving them and serve yourself this year. Serve yourself, figure out how it goes. You have 1 year to do this, and if you can pull it off, that year will point you in the direction that where you can do it for the rest of your life. I believe it takes 2 years for anything to come to fruition. 2 years for your child to really talk, 2 years for them to potty train, 2 years for you to figure out what your amazing gifts are, where you're going in the world, and how you're going to be your full manifestation of your potential. That's my podcast for this week. Happy New Year, everybody. I hope that 2024 is a beautiful year for you, despite whatever politics are going on. Let this be the year that you blossom. Take care.
The views, information, and opinions expressed on this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent Gifted ND Incorporated, Lillian Skinner, or the Gifted Neurodivergent Podcast. This podcast, Lillian Skinner, and Gifted ND Incorporated are not responsible and do not verify the accuracy of the information contained in this podcast series. The primary purpose of this podcast is to inform and educate. The Gifted Neurodivergent Podcast is only available for private, non-commercial use. Any other use of the information contained within this podcast must be done with express written approval and knowledge of Lillian Skinner. You may not edit, modify, or redistribute any part of this podcast. The developer assumes no liability for this podcast or its use on any other podcast or other media.